I felt there was a vibrant Catholic faith here, and that's been proved to be true.
The roots of that faith are buried beneath the blackjack oak of Pottawatomie County. It is a peaceful place tucked away in history. The past sprinkled with the present. The genesis of Oklahoma Catholicism is found here at Sacred Heart. The founding fathers would hardly recognize what is left of their early home. A few buildings, 2 cemeteries, and 100 years of faith remain. A great Christ crucified in bronze watches over the Sisters of Mercy. Further away, separated by distance and segregated by gender, rest the early Benedictine men. Priests, brothers, and abbots await God's good time. And yet the zeal that brought them to this land would reach far beyond their primitive beginning. With the words of Christ in their hearts and on their minds, Benedictine monks stepped into the wilderness of Indian Territory and the beginning of the Catholic presence in Oklahoma. Among them was a feisty priest with a steel gray beard and matching personality. Isidore Ribot came with 2 purposes: to build a monastery and follow the Lord's commission. Coming from quaint Belgium, Father Ribot could not have been prepared for what awaited him: a big sky and an ocean of grass. He would find his first church in Atoka, a house of worship for railroad workers. St. Patrick soon has the first Catholic school in the territory. By 1880, Father Ribot has his monastery. Actually, it was more of a monastic complex located in the heart of Indian country. Indian tribes and European immigrants provided numerous souls needing ministry. Once established, he sent for more monks. The ones who answered his call were not impressed with what they found.
When the additional monks came over, one of them said the routine was the same every day: rice and prunes for breakfast and rice and prunes for dinner. We never had to ask what was for dinner. We always knew what it was going to be.
Young and old alike knew hard living.
I don't know how they did it. And some of them, we have a lot of monks that died early in their life. They had to have a strong faith. The priests would go out from Sacred Heart to the various missions in horse buggy or on the horse, all over the state. And I just can't imagine doing that, flopping around on a horse and for hundreds of miles and be gone for weeks.
The Abbey at Sacred Heart had become an outpost of civilization. At the turn of the century, it would burn to the ground and be rebuilt, only to be abandoned when the monks moved to nearby Shawnee before the Dust Bowl. The men and women of Sacred Heart were a cultural oasis, providing Catholic spirituality, education, and the sacraments to a diverse congregation.
So you have this very rough and ready kind of make-do, where there's no church and no hope for a church anytime soon. And the priest is somebody passing through, and he's going to be passing right on someplace else, and you might not see him for up to a year.
Mass was celebrated whenever and wherever possible. Like the early church, the faithful gathered in homes. Stained glass windows and hardwood pews wouldn't arrive for another half-century.
Well, you were probably in somebody's living room, possibly even in somebody's bedroom. It was common for there to be a dresser with a mirror, and they'd take a sheet and they'd throw that over the mirror. And of course, the priest stood facing that with his back to the congregation. So you have people kneeling on the floor, kids probably under the bed peeking out.
They were simple people in an uncluttered life. Even a complex liturgy could be reduced to plain belief. The territory would soon receive new missionaries. The Sisters of Mercy sent their women into this untamed land armed only with a sturdy faith and an equally strong determination to educate. They founded St. Mary's Academy at Sacred Heart and other schools among the immigrant miners of Krebs and Lehigh, as well as Mount St. Mary's in Oklahoma City. Boys and girls academies would soon follow. Franciscan nuns would establish the oldest hospital in the state, St. Anthony's, also in Oklahoma City. The Benedictines built a large mother house in Guthrie, and from it staffed schools across Oklahoma. Their hallmark would always be education and a presence that was uniquely Catholic.
A lot of times these nuns were really pioneers. They were doing the same kind of thing that people were doing in dugouts, only they were doing it with 40 or 50 kids hanging onto their skirts.
In 1891, the man most responsible for the creation of the diocese began his service in Oklahoma. Belgian-born Theophile Meerschaert had been a bishop for only 10 days when he arrived from Louisiana. The new bishop got busy and stayed busy for the next 32 years.
He was a workhorse. He was just one of those guys that stays at it. He traveled constantly. When he wasn't back and forth to Europe, he was out there. He had all of those missions, by train, by buckboard.
He found a Catholic community that was made up of 26 priests, 21 churches, and about 5,000 parishioners. Much like today, American-born priests were in short supply.
He had very few priests and he had very few resources. If it weren't for his background in Europe, he would have nothing.
The bishop would return to the old world 23 times, asking, sometimes begging priests to come to this place. Adding to the challenge, money was in short supply in those days, but what Bishop Meerschaert lacked in funds, he well made up for in zeal. A rather large man, he had a knack for stealing the show. He crisscrossed the flatlands, baptizing, preaching, confirming, and conveying Catholicism to anyone who would take note. And when he spoke, anyone within earshot would listen.
They were very proud of him. He was what a bishop is supposed to be, the symbol of unity. You wanted to go and see this guy because he was something different from what you had around you, which was mud and pigs and wheat and corn and stuff. So people went, and he drew big audiences. And he'd wear his mitre and hold his crozier, and he would lecture on the infallibility of the Pope. And in those days, there was no television. You know, he was the only thing out there.
The bishop began keeping a journal shortly after his arrival here. For 3 decades, he wrote our history in small details and perfect penmanship.
The first serious work since my sickness.
For Father White and other historians, these journals hold the story of how our faith began to grow and spread. Reading them, Bishop Meerschaert's greatest success becomes obvious.
Just getting through. 32 years on the Oklahoma prairies, you know, going to these tiny little chapels out there that he had blessed and dedicated and bucked the people up and, you know, encouraged them and all the rest of that. And just doing it day after day after day after day.